Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me really great pleasure to be with you. Much of my time usually is spent in meeting rooms of the United Nations, where there'll be lots of older people with vested interests, whether it's national, business, or their own organizational interests. And very often I think that we fail to do the things that need to be done in this world, because our world currently really very critically needs the urgent attention, just as Mr. Ian Temple has talked about. You know, these are very big issues that affect our world. This is a world that we as adults, unfortunately, are leaving to your generation. So what is going to be your role in such a world? Okay. Is it possible to off the lights so that the words can come up a bit more clearly? So I just wanted to ask you, within the world, where is this world going? What are the kind of newspaper articles you read? What do you feel? Do you feel a sense of happiness? Do you feel a sense of insecurity? Do you feel that perhaps you're helpless? Some of these issues are so large that you cannot perhaps do anything about them, right? So what is your role and what is our role? So I just wanted to talk to you very briefly on some of the challenges for the international community in the next decade. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the world I grew up in. My children tell me that my world was like this is a weird world. They can't relate to it at all. But it was really, when you grew up in the 90s, you thought you were the greatest generation ever. We had great movies, we had great music, our hairstyles were really funky, our clothes were really exaggerated, and we explored a lot of issues. Next slide, please. Yeah. But it was also a time, the 90s were a time of hope, right? And the United Nations at that point went on to do the large world conferences where they would bring all the countries of the world together. And when they talk about countries, they're talking about governments, they're talking about civil society, they're talking about academics, think tanks. And these were large conferences of almost 10,000 people, and they lasted like 2-3 weeks, where they would think about what is the way forward. The first such conference of the 90s that I can remember is the United Nations conference. The first one was on environment. It's called the Rio Conference. And the Rio Conference was large in imagining what could a world with a sustainable environment, what would it be like, what it would take for us to achieve that, and what do we have to do. The second, of course, in 1993, I believe, it was the Vienna World Conference on Human Rights, right? And this was the time that we thought that every individual in the world has and possesses inalienable human rights. That you, no matter who you are, what race you are, what color of your skin, what sex you are, whether you're male or female, whether you came from a poor country or a rich country, whether you were a migrant in a wealthy country, whether you were a refugee, regardless of those things, every human being was equal and you possessed in fullness all of these rights. Next one, please. Yeah. And then in 1994, can you imagine, every year they had a large conference, was the International Conference on Population and Development. This was about putting population policies and putting the individual, the couple, and the family at the center of government policies, and ensuring that every human being would be able to realize full autonomy and full decision-making over their sexual and reproductive lives. So this sounds like a very big term, but it's basically the right to choose who you marry, when to marry, if to marry at all, right? How many children to have, how often to have them, and if you wanted to have children at all in the first place. Then we had, in 1995, the 4th World Conference of Women in Beijing. And this put gender equality right at the center of the global attention. And though you may not realize it today, but we've come a long way as women, right? It was only in the last 50, 60 years that we've had the right to vote, the right to go to school, to attend university, to graduate from university with a degree and have our name on that degree, right? The right to own property, the right to grant property, the right to inherit. So these were all developments that just happened in the last 40 years or so. And yet, many of the world's women do not enjoy that equality. They're not equal members in the family. You can see that sometimes in the newspaper articles you read. You know, we still have high levels of domestic violence, right? Sometimes boys and girls in the same family may not get equal attention or equal resources from the family. And of course, girls may also be marginalized in the sense that they suffer the risk of violence and harassment, including online harassment, more than boys do, right? So some of these things were handled there. So of course, it was a great time to live in. When I was, I think, about quite young, I won't reveal my age, but I was quite young, but it was great to open up the newspaper and think, hey, this is the world I am going to live in, right? What a beautiful world it was that we imagined then. We'd have a sustainable environment, we'd have equality for women and men, we'd have human rights for every individual, and that was the vision we had. Can I have the next slide, please? And of course, one of our biggest achievements was the end of apartheid. You know, I'm wondering whether it was just amazing to think that there was groups of nations that got together across the globe, we worked in global cooperation, and we got down with apartheid. So you know that apartheid is the system of racial segregation according to people who were Europeans and non-Europeans that was still existing in South Africa, right? So this is one of the greatest achievements that happened in the 90s. So, and it was a time that the global community actually believed that if we worked together, we could improve standards, we could have global standards that we all aspire to. Because global standards, like human rights, are a good thing, right? And the global community could, if we work together, end the war, right? And make this world a better place for all of our citizens, right? However, unfortunately, today, the world looks like a very different place than what we envisioned it in the 1990s. So, I note that Mr. Ian Temple actually said something to the effect of how many people are really poor in this world. And it's quite shocking that in today, 2017, the global community has an indicator on poverty. That indicator is, they say $2, but the World Bank will tell you it's $1.90 a day. $1.90 US dollars, right? And that would be how much? 9 ringgit. So most of the world's population, they say poverty has reduced, but this group of people live on 9 ringgit a day, right? Maybe you want to think, what could you buy with 9 ringgit? Could you buy 3 meals? Could you pay your rent? Could you pay your electricity bills? Can you have access to clean water on just 9 ringgit a day just for yourself? So you need to think about the measurements that we use, right? So this is one of the big injustices in the world today, that in a world of so much, that there are so many with so little. Okay. Next slide, please. So, beyond these poverty figures is this idea of inequality, right? So you have poor people, you have rich people, that's fine. Or so people say, but what in the last 2 or 3 years, we have actually focused our attention to the issue of inequality. So the wealth of the richest 85 people, that's about maybe half the size of this group, owns the wealth of half of the world's population. So we need to think about what is the redistribution that we're thinking about in our world, right? How did we create this world? I mean, remember I told you, we wanted a world which was sustainable, we had a sustainable environment, everyone was equal, we had human rights, and we wanted equality for everyone, but we ended up with this situation. And this situation is actually something like you would see in your history books, the Pharaoh system, the structural you know, the structure of society or the stratification of society looks so much akin to something which is in prehistoric times, and those were not really, how do I say, a very, I guess, maybe it was a happy time for the pharaohs, but not for the rest of people, right? So, the world we live today is also a world that is really challenged by many crisis situations. So this is a map that shows the potential areas of conflict, right? And it comes from a business magazine. Not this one, okay, so it comes from the University of Cambridge, which is a reputable source for this map. And you can see that if you talk about the darker blue shades, and you can see the size of the red dots. The larger the dot, the larger that conflict is going to cost us, right? Now, do we have to worry about conflicts in other countries? Yes, we do. Because if people fight in the Philippines, they come to our country, right? And if there is an environmental disaster in Thailand, there will be spillover of people. So it's not only about, I'm only going to take care of my house, but I also have to help my neighbors take care of their houses, because if we are to be prosperous, and we are to be developed, and we are to be progressive, we have to be in it all together, right? Can I have the next one? The other one was the climate change. Climate change is a very complex problem. So, due to pollution and our unsustainable consumption patterns in the world, what we have done is we have chopped down our forests, we've polluted the air. I mean, in short, the science behind it, that's just the time isn't permitted to say that. Yeah, so we've polluted our waters, we've polluted the air, we have raised the temperatures in the world, we have, and as a result of that, we have ice caps melting, sea level rising, and the Great Barrier Reef is dying. So, and if in your science you will know, right, the importance of the coral in order to sustain, as a key thing to sustain our life, right, as human beings. So, and as a part of that heat and global weather patterns change, you have areas that are great areas of drought. What is the first thing that happens when there is drought? You can't grow plants. You can't grow food. People go hungry. And if if there's drought, then people who live there need to go somewhere else to find their food, right? They can't just continue to live there, die. Okay. So there were a lot of both of these things, conflict and climate change, cause displacements, right? This is the most, I promise you, text-intensive slide you will see in my presentation. So there were 31.1 million displacements, right? And of this, 6.9 were due to conflict, right? A lot of people know about the conflict in the Middle East and the refugee crisis and how European governments have responded to it. But now the new conflict is actually in sub-Saharan Africa. So you have DRC Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, who just had ethnic war break out. So 1 million people are displaced because of that. You also have this, for those of you who have followed, you have the situation in southern Sudan, a newly independent country, which is both the cause of climate change, and then inter-ethnic groups and inter-religious groups are fighting, right? So this is like the pattern of the world we live in. So we know about conflict, but actually it is climate change-induced displacements which are far higher than conflict-induced displacements, okay? And where does this happen? It happens in the lower and middle-income countries mainly. So countries who are already don't have enough money to have schools, to have schools, hospitals, or put resources into like developing their society will be hit crisis after crisis, and the citizens of those countries will suffer disproportionately, right? So, is this the world we imagined that would exist in 2017? Of course not. Nobody thought we would be in the place that we would be. Next slide, please. So the global community did try to do something very important from 2014, 2015, 2016, yes, because last time they could do a conference in like, a year and come to resolution. But this time they had to take 3 years to do what they would do in 1 year, and they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. So these were like 17 goals, and these include goals and targets on issues such as climate change, environment. They have water, forests, seas, everything inside there. They have sustainable cities, which is an important thing. They also have our social issues like access to health services, access to education for young people. They also have equality. Gender equality is one of the fundamental goals of this, right? Next slide, please. And of course, we civil society were involved in that. So this was a great opportunity for us to be involved, and on that side you will see my amazing staff members who actually participated in those discussions and negotiations, and we were able to, of course, we pushed for the goal on health and gender equality. And I had the privilege of addressing the UN General Assembly. And that is a podium that is usually reserved only for prime ministers and presidents and their representatives and celebrities. So did I ever think that, when I was reading the newspaper, right, about Rio conference, or that I was reading the newspaper about the Beijing conference, that ever in my life I would be able to get to that podium? Never, right? But anything is possible. Yeah. And of course we had the amazing Paris Climate Agreement, which everyone in the world except one man thinks is very important. Next slide, please. So I want to tell you that, so the global community was really trying to reimagine our world. But there's one critical community that is missing from this picture. Do you have an idea which community this is? Do you have an idea? Great. Do you want to tell me? Who? Anonymous. Anonymous hacker group, is it? Okay, young people, right? So young people are not counted within the SDGs. So young people, people such as yourself, aged from anywhere between 12 and 30, 28, 30. Okay, no, 30 years old, you don't think they're young, but they think they're young. But you are not counted within the Sustainable Development Goals, in the sense that there is no goal for young people exclusively for yourself, right? And government leaders and data statisticians say that because they're disaggregating how they count this data, and you're counted in that way. However, this is the world that SDGs will leave to you, and you have every right to participate in this process. You have every right to form and make decisions with regards to this, and because this, whatever comes out in the next 30 years, or what is called now Agenda 2030, which is the Sustainable Development Goals, will affect your lives, right? So this model United Nations, I hope this will ensure skills building, perspective development, that you will get to share ideas on how exactly, you will make this world, and how you will leave a world that is better for everyone. Because the world is in need of creative solutions. People in my generation, we've tried everything. Does it look like it's worked? Partly. Oh, that's been very kind, but no. Maybe we did. Our report card is not looking very good, okay? And it needs compassionate people, idealistic people, and people who can work together in order to make this world and save this world, basically. So I think that it's very, and I know that we live in an Asian culture, an Asian society, and we are taught and reiterated either at home, by extended family, because we all come with that as well, and at our places of worship, that we should not question our elders. We should not question people in authority. But I just want to tell you, it is your role. Have courage. You can question, I'm not going to get in trouble with the teacher, but you can question everyone. It is your right to question. It is your right to question your parents. It is right to question your elders. It is right to question your ministers. It is your right to question your prime minister or your president. It is your right, and you should have the courage to do it. And part of that courage can start with exercises like this. So, and I wanted to, I think the last slide is the next slide? Yeah. I wanted to leave you with this quote that always inspires me. And it's from Eleanor Roosevelt. So Eleanor Roosevelt was, of course, the wife of President Roosevelt. And she was known as actually like kind of president of the world because she imagined this human rights dialogue, right? She had this concept in her mind. And so her favorite quote, my favorite quote of hers is, "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." And if you have a beautiful dream, I think you can achieve it. And I have great hopes that you will earnestly engage yourselves as citizens of the world because you're worthy of being that. And you will create, not only for yourselves, but for us in our old age, a better world than we have perhaps created for you. Thank you.